What's up, Dragon Brood? I will say, unless you've been living under a rock, you probably realize already that this card has become a little bit of a problem. And not a big surprise when you consider two major events happened over the last week, and 12 of the top 16 decks were decks including this card. More of a combo also with Agatha Soul Cauldron, but still, the point remains. And if you're a newer player, you probably don't understand how to battle these decks. So what we're going to talk about today is a couple of strategies on how to battle them. And then I'm going to go over a game that we had that might even be in today's video that got posted, but kind of talk about why we made the decision we did during the course of that game. Okay, a couple of quick things before we get into the video. This is kind of a new series I've been doing over the last, I think, 4 weeks, and some of you seem to really like these, so really need you to do me a favor if you can. If you're on a device where you're able to, please hit the like button so YouTube knows you like these types of videos and will share them with other people. Additionally, subscribe, so that way you don't miss these things, and be sure to hit the notification bell if you want to continue to get videos in this series. This will help me know that, we're trying 3 or 4 different series right now, which ones I should prioritize, and make sure that y'all are getting the videos that you want. Anyway, back to the video. All right, so general strategy. The main thing you're going to be worried about a lot of the times is the actual Soul Cauldron. And this just means you're going to have to go after graveyard effects to make sure they can't get the card that they want under it. Now, sometimes they'll play it early on turn 2, and honestly, I would say if you have the ability to destroy it, go for it. I wouldn't wait around too long because a lot of times, if you just even give them an opening of a turn, or later on in the game, maybe you're low on mana and can't cast your spell, you're now going to get caught in a situation where you have to leave the mana up forever. And they don't have a ton of major threats to deal with, barring them getting something with a whole lot of counters on it from maybe of like prophetic or eidetic memory, right? So if that happens, then yeah, you should go ahead and deal with the creature instead. But until then, you can make chump blockers a lot of times and get by okay, because they don't have any way to really trample through, and they only have, depending on the version, a couple of copies of even a flying creature. The rest are all grounded, so even tokens are good enough to block with. Also, be aware that those decks do have a few bits of removal, usually going to be in the form of Torch the Tower, and often going to be something like Into the Floodmaw, right? So if that's the case, you also have to remember, if you're getting to those later turns, you probably need 2 blockers instead of 1. And now sometimes they will just draw into multiple removal and you're just going to have to deal with that. That's just playing Magic. But don't leave it easy for them to kill you with just 1 token creature backed up, or even 1 creature at all, when you know that it just takes 1 removal, they put 4 or 5 counters on the thing, and now they can attack you for lethal. So kind of have to keep that in mind during combat sequences, just to make sure you don't get hit by random situations that were avoidable. Another interesting thing to consider is that those decks, again, don't have many flyers, and they're not really playing sweepers. So if you can spend the first turn or two setting up, going wide, making a couple of tokens, you can slow down on the later turns and use your mana more effectively. Double blocking, triple blocking, putting some counters on things, leaving mana up so you can counter something or remove something from their graveyard, because you're not worried about your creatures going away to any type of the typical creature spells, right? There's no Star Cage, there's no Pyroclasm, nothing like that that's going to really cause any problems for you. Another thing to consider is you don't have to be too quick to respond to things. Now, some versions will play a couple of copies of Spell Pierce, and if they have it in that type of deck. You just have to salute it and give it to them. But many times they won't. So that means that if you have your own, say, Into the Floodmaws, or Shoot the Sheriff, or anything like that, you can wait until they decide to try to put counters on their thing in combat from Proph's Eidetic Memory, or maybe they get the Soul Cauldron and now they want to try to throw counters on it and try to combo, right? You can disrupt things for a turn or two, and sometimes that's all you need to buy yourself that additional turn that allow you to win. Just don't be too quick to use your spells if you don't have to be. And then, of course, there's always the point of just understanding when, all right, you can try to be defensive, but they're going to see enough cards. If they just have it, they have it. And that's when you need to just go for it and force them to have what they need to beat you. Because if they don't, you can often win the next turn when they whiff. Now, that's not something you want to hope for or plan on, but when you're in that situation, you have to be able to recognize it, that your one card isn't going to be able to break up what they're trying to do, so you just have to go for it. With all that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at a game I recently played, and I'll try to talk you through a few major decisions that happened in that one. Okay, we're not going to watch the whole game, but I will probably fast forward through some points, and we can talk about key decisions that got made. So this is our turn 1 and our opponent's turn 2, and Looking at the rest of my hand, I don't have a lot going on here. However, next turn I can instant speed with the Picklock Prankster, put stuff into my graveyard, and maybe get something back with a helping hand, which will hopefully start creating blockers to create some space, if you will, in the game. However, right now, if I can get rid of this creature, we're under no pressure, right? And if you don't deal with the Mako now, there is a chance that you may not be able to deal with it easily in the future, depending on what type of removal you have, right? Even if you had spot removal that deals burn damage, there's a chance they're going to put even 1 or 2 counters on at instant speed, and there's nothing you're going to be able to do. So this is your one window of opening, and the only thing you're really worried about on turn 3 of the opponent playing is going to be something like Tursa, so they can draw and discard and maybe fill up the graveyard. However, looking at my hand, I don't really have anything that's going to be able to stop them dealing with the graveyard anyway. I don't have anything that's going to be able to deal with Tursa, right? So, and I definitely don't want to bounce Tursa and give them 2 opportunities to draw and discard. That's silly. So here, I'd rather just slow down the Mako. That means we don't take any damage. We have an extra couple turns. And I know I need at minimum 1 setup turn to get stuff in the graveyard. So this playing out, I go ahead, resolve the Into the Floodmaw. I get my turn. Our plan's basically the same here. Just like I was saying, I'm just going to pass. Best case scenario is no Tursa, and then we just get a clean turn, no damage, right? Nothing in their graveyard. The downside is this could have been a Vivi turn, and I wouldn't have anything against it. But realistically, if they did have something like a Tursa here, had I not killed the Mako, or at least not got off the battlefield, the Mako would have still been hitting us for 4. So I really didn't have a better play in that scenario. So I go ahead and helping hand. I get Kiora onto the battlefield. You know, I'm kind of looking at this hand and not really sure what we're going to do, because all we're doing is either casting some number of ops to sleight of hands or playing another Picklock Prankster's ability so we can put more stuff in the graveyard. Don't really love either of these, but in hindsight, I made kind of a bad play. I could have just put the Cosmic Grand Zenith into the yard if I wanted to and have an option to get it back. However, looks like I'm going to have a 4th land anyway, and I can just play it. It's fine. And this is what I was saying. The removal is Torch the Tower, so I had no real inclinations that I was going to get to keep this anyway. And this is where games can start turning bad for you in this matchup, right? When your opponents are casting Winter Night Stories, especially if they have multiples, they're often going to see enough cards that they're going to get to start sculpting their hand to be what it needs to be, or they will put stuff in the graveyard that then puts you on notice that, all right, you see the Vivi go in the yard, this next turn becomes a turn you have to play defensively, right? If my opponent puts a Vivi in the yard here, I now have to find a way to leave mana open so that I can either get rid of the Tursa so they can't immediately put counters on it, or get rid of the Soul Cauldron, assuming they have it in hand or not. So now I just have to make the decision on what to do here. We just take 3. We still have plenty of life. We know that we can make more blockers next turn. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the For the Fae here. Nothing great. I just get back a Charter Course, and this is fine. Seam Rip, however, is a good removal card here in this scenario, but not one you necessarily want to rely on. This is okay if you know you have an extra turn, right? Like if my opponent already had a Cauldron, Seam Rip's great. Obviously, off the top, get rid of it. So it's a little bit tough, but it is good at getting rid of a Cauldron. And if you have to, a Mako, or say maybe Fear Missing Out if you think they're going to get multiple attack steps against you. So it's not a bad card. It does have multiple targets in this deck. And then here we go ahead and just load up. We'll get Kiora again. We can discard some cards. And we're making multiple blockers here. Because again, remember I was saying they don't have a bunch of ways to come over the top flying or whatever. So if you can just make more chump blockers, you reduce the number of opportunities they have to deal any real damage to you. And truthfully, getting an extra turn or 2 is huge if you can get it against this deck. And let me say again that I can get away with this play on this turn and tap out because my opponent doesn't have a Vivi in the graveyard. They don't have a Cauldron already. Otherwise, I would probably have played this turn differently and left up the Into the Floodmaw so I can at least respond and get rid of the Tursa if they try to put counters on it. Or, well, actually, yeah, that would be the play, right? Because we're able to bounce a Tursa, and then on our turn, we'd be able to play a Seam Rip to get rid of the Cauldron. We'd leave mana open for that. Since they don't have either one, then this is just a case of fine. If you find it, great. but I think we can do this and at least set up to try to win in 2 turns. Because oftentimes they can put a bunch of counters on one creature and just wreck you. Now here comes the Soul Cauldron, and let's talk about this for a second, because right now we know there's nothing in their graveyard that they can really use it. I don't have a creature with any activated abilities. They don't have any creatures with activated abilities in their graveyard. So as it stands, the Soul Cauldron is not a crazy threat we have to panic over just yet. However, I already have the removal card in hand. So I'm going to talk about this as just a general scenario. Could they discard a card? Maybe. If they had a fear of missing out here, they would get to draw and discard. And if they have it, you go for it if you're in their shoes, because if you stick it, all of a sudden, because of the Vivi ability, you have access to 4 more mana immediately. And you can start looking at stuff with the Winter Night stories and whatever and kind of have a silly turn. And we have yet to do any significant amount of damage, so, you know, it's kind of a shields down opportunity for them right now, for at least for us, that they get to punch through. But right now, this is a case where you see the Cauldron, and it's not too threatening. Fortunately, we're tapped out, so we got lucky here. Now here, they decide to just Flood Maw, and this is kind of what we were talking about, where if they don't have anything else to do, they're just trying to get blockers out of the way. However, we have so many cheap spells that this is going to actually work in our favor, because now I can just replay Zenith and play something else. The thing here now is that I have to start debating what I want to leave open mana-wise, right? Do I want to just be able to bounce the Tursa? Or do I want to be able to just get rid of the Soul Cauldron and make them have another? Which does become a bit of a gamble, because the opponent already has Winter Night stories in their graveyard, right? So we have to make these kind of tough decisions. I would say, ultimately, the safest decision, if we wanted that, would probably be to get rid of the Cauldron, and at combat start, when they decide to put counters on something, we just bounce Tursa. And again, Tursa comes with the risk of them finding another thing and putting in the graveyard, but if they don't have the Cauldron, then you make them find both the Vivi and the Cauldron, which makes it less scary. Alright, so moving ahead, we decided on just playing the Zenith and playing the Seam Rip to get rid of the Cauldron. Right? In doing so, that puts us in a situation where now we can attack with Kiora, you know, unabated. We also can get in with the token. That's going to leave us an 8/8, a 2/4, a 1/1, and a 1/1. There's pretty much no way they're going to attack through for anything threatening, even with double Winter Night stories and Proph's Eidetic Memory out. So this is a situation where we're saying, okay, we're going to get in for 4, opponent's going to go to 16. We know we have End of the Flood Maw, so we can get rid of at least one blocker next turn if necessary. So this is one of those turns where it's just, okay, can you do it? If you just have the cards that let you draw, discard, you find Vivi, you find Cauldron, and you draw perfect, you do it. If not, we potentially just win next turn. Now, the opponent did cast our Winter Night stories. They did get rid of our Kiora, but here it's just Torch the Tower. Now the opponent's tapped out, and we know we're not really worried about anything anymore. And then here it's just a quick check on the math. You know, we're attacking for 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, plus 4 when we cast our second spell. And then that's all it's going to take. We're going to get the bonus from the Cosmic Grand Zenith, and then we attack. And effectively, this was almost all one attack step in this game. I mean, we got one small hit for 4 in, but yeah. Now, I don't want to say that that game was a perfect example, because the opponent obviously didn't find a Vivi. It's just one I had top of mind that we could talk about and go through the strategies of why things matter on certain turns. However, if you see during the course of that game, that's why I kind of talked about stuff even outside the scope of that game, is that there were a couple of spots where, had they had the Vivi already in the graveyard, I would have had to play differently and say leave up that End of the Flood Maw so they couldn't immediately try to combo. Then on the next turn, try to get rid of the Soul Cauldron, possibly, right? So you kind of have to read the game state for what the opponent's able to do. Do they have a creature already on the battlefield? Do they have a Vivi in the graveyard or not? Do they have Cauldron on the battlefield or not? Depending on those 3 check marks, depends on the type of plays you have access to and are available to you for potentially losing the game or putting yourself in a position to win the game. So hopefully, if you're newer to the game, or maybe you just started playing with the last couple sets, you didn't know anything about more in-depth strategy, and this type of video helped. If not, you can tell me I'm crazy, I'm a moron, this was useless. I don't know. I'm just trying to help people out, because I do decently against it. Again, this is best of 1. Best of 3 is going to be a whole different story. But, you know, let me know in the comments. If you like this type of stuff, we'll keep up this series. If not, then, you know, maybe we won't do it anymore. But either way, leave me a comment. Do all the things YouTube likes. Subscribe. Hit the button. Do all that. Especially hit the like button so YouTube knows you like it. And watch the next video because it helps the channel and YouTube says you're going to like it anyway. It's all of you for now. We'll see you next time.